Okay, next video. I recently tweeted about this, and I wanted to kind of expand on the idea that I tried to put forward there. You guys hear me a lot talk on this channel about the internet being a thing, not a place, and why that's important, and how the church is interacting with it in both those regards in kind of not really well thought out ways. And so as I deal with that, as I try to kind of navigate the theological waters of the internet being a thing or a place, I frequently come to realizations of just, how we're treating it, how we're, as, evangelical churches or, just, Protestant churches in general, dealing with the internet, and how there's very little written about kind of like the philosophy about it. There's lots written on the practicality about it. You can find 100 different articles and YouTube videos about how to grow your Instagram channel, but there's not of like why you would grow your Instagram channel, that kind of stuff. And what's been getting to me lately is the concept that that until the internet showed up, and until churches started kind of, experimenting with the internet as a way and a means of, doing church services, either as church services or using church services as content. Until that point happened, and maybe like a little bit before if you want to talk about like radio and TV ministry and stuff. But there was a sizable amount of time in Christendom that was... that this wasn't even a discussion, that no one questioned whether or not there was a church in Ephesus and whether or not it was a real place, because it was a real place. All churches for ever have always been places. There were no kind of like could be a thing or is mostly a place churches out there. In order to have a church, you needed a body of believers assembling together, and that was like, it wasn't maybe a stated kind of bare bones necessity, but it's a reality. You didn't have a church in the 1500s without a place for a group of Christians to gather. It didn't exist, and now we have this kind of movement, this spurred on by the pandemic and the kind of circumstance that brought us all to using technology the way we do, where churches are moving online, and you have what is ostensibly a thing. The internet is a thing. It is an interconnected network of computers. None of those are places. Okay, it has the aesthetics of a place. It garners and makes the feelings of a place, because you can get connected to other people who are themselves in other places. So it has the aesthetics and feelings of a place, but it is not in fact a place. And Christians are calling it church, I don't think without the rigor that's required theologically in this regard. And so that's kind of where I see the problem kind of diverging, is because this is a new thing. I don't think anyone argues that it's a new thing, but we're refusing to treat it as a new thing. What you see is an acts of eisegesis to kind of justify this new thing as if it's always been an old thing. That, people will take how Paul wrote his letters and his comments about wishing to be with these separate churches that he wrote those letters to, as license for, using the internet in a way that allows you to facilitate church that's not inside a specific locale. And between that and just kind of the looseness of this whole internet ecclesiology, if you really want to be kind of technical about the terms, really, it seems like there's not enough thought being put into it, and there's not enough debate being put into it. That it's literally just everyone hopped on board. You see that with the stats being used and where they're coming from, which is also problematic, because if you're going to use a stat to justify use, that stat better be representative of like honest adoption and use, because like 95% of churches did not decide to go online as a viable ministry option during the pandemic. They were forced to go online. Their options were shut the doors, get arrested or sick, or go online. That's not them adopting it. And you can see that simply by trying to find stats on how many churches were online prior to the pandemic, and all those outside forces kind of twisting the arm of the church onto online services. There were churches who were doing online services. There were big churches and small churches, but the numbers weren't nearly near where that 95-96% that keeps getting touted in these spaces as licensed to go online with your services. So I think recognizing that a change has happened, that we are in fact in new territory, and that maybe some sober second thoughts are necessary from a theological perspective before we just wholesale go on to this, because it's accelerating, just like tech tends to do, just like the thing that technology tends to do. It's accelerating, okay? The metaverse was out for what, a year before Life Church had a metaverse church on it. They hopped on that immediately. There wasn't like a waiting period. They didn't want to see what it was like. They were early adopters, which is a virtue in some cases. But what they're essentially doing is taking this thing and making it paramount to their ministry process, to them doing online church services. They're taking a thing, this metaverse, which is servers and computers, miles away from where everyone who's going to be accessing that church exists. It's taking that thing, that group of things, and saying, this is church, this is the ecclesia, this is where we are gathering. It's taking a thing and making it the object that facilitates worship in and of itself. And anywhere else, that will be idolatry. If you had, if you took a concept like family, and you made that the thing that facilitates worship, that's the reason we worship is because of family, every evangelical on Twitter would, be derailing the person who posted that up, because it would be obvious idolatry. And you can do that for work, you can do that for sex, you can do that for success, you can do that for a lot of different things. You can do that for, elements. You can do that for the sun and the moon. You can have all these things where this is the reason why we worship, and it would be clearly idolatry. And what I think we have with the online church is this weird stripping down of what the Christian faith is to make the worship itself the idol. That, we're going to only have aesthetics and feelings as the thing that facilitates worship. And those aesthetics and feelings are going to be wrapped up in this thing, this object, this series of objects that is the internet, the connection of devices in communication with each other. And I think that's idolatry. And I think that's where this all kind of boils down to, that it all boils down to worship and what a group of Christians in person is doing versus, connected Christians across platforms are doing. And there's just not enough talk about that. So, I just want to leave you with that one thought to kind of, bounce around your brain like a BB. Remember we were talking about theological spidey senses last couple videos ago. When do you think that churches stopped being only places in real time? Because there was a point where it could not have possibly have been part of a thing like the internet. That churches were only ever, at one point, gatherings of Christian in real time, in specific spaces. That Ephesus was a place in way more definite and concrete terms than TikTok will ever be. And TikTok is a thing in ways that Ephesus could never have been a thing. And that kind of divide and understanding of how the reality we live in and the worship that we're trying to give to God and exercise here on earth and the communities we're trying to build, that distinction matters. That this thing-place distinction is one of the most important things that we're going to be talking about in this space, and that it's not being talked about by as many experts that are out there is a problem. So I'll leave you with that. Things, places, Ephesus, TikTok. We'll talk to you later.